1. Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined, as always, by the managing editor of Horns247, Taylor Estes. Taylor, we are wrapping up the Texas regular season. Texas, as we talked about in our game recap podcast, finished the regular season with a 38-27 win at home over Baylor with a dominant fourth quarter that included 22 straight running plays to end the game and put Bijan Robinson at over 1,500 yards rushing for the season. He is now a Doak Walker Award finalist, along with Michigan's Blake Corum and Illinois' Chase Brown. We had a chance to talk to Steve Sarkisian on Monday, and he hit on all kinds of points that we will get to. And we are waiting for the Texas Longhorns bowl fate, which looks like it's going to be the Alamo Bowl.
Right.
If TCU beats K-State, it will almost certainly be the Alamo Bowl because TCU would go to the college football playoff. K-State would go to the Sugar Bowl, and Texas would be as the third place team in the Alamo Bowl. The only way it could change is if K-State beats TCU and the Cotton Bowl passes on TCU as an at-large invitee to the New Year's Six to face Tulane. If that happened, then TCU would fall to the Alamo and Texas would go to the Cheez-It Bowl against an ACC team, most likely either Clemson, Florida State, or get this, North Carolina.
Mac Brown reunion there. Yeah, that's I mean, there's definitely a lot of, things to work with. It would be really shocking to me, Chip, if TCU were to lose the Big 12 championship game, if the Cotton Bowl passed on TCU. The proximity itself would be a desirable one for them, being, in Fort Worth, and the Cotton Bowl is at Jerry World, right? AT&T Stadium,
Yep.
I believe. Yeah, so I mean, that would be kind of. I know that TCU, the brand it's not, it's a private school, a smaller school. So the brand isn't of say like a Texas, just for the pure alumni base, I would say. But the proximity, it would be shocking to me, honestly, if they passed, I would say on TC, especially a one-loss TCU team. That would just, I feel like all signs are pointing to San Antonio for Texas right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, with the season that TCU has had and the way that, the Dallas-Fort Worth area has embraced that team, I'd be stunned
Yeah.
if the Cotton Bowl passed on a one-loss TCU for the matchup with Tulane.
And that's assuming also that TCU falls out of the college football playoff too.
Right.
If they lost, because there's still a one-loss team at that point. Their loss would be into the Big 12 champion, that they already beat in the season. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, let's be honest. The college football playoff has screwed over TCU in the past, the first year of the college football playoff. I think it would be a shame, in my opinion, if they did that again. And obviously, if they win the Big 12, it shouldn't be an issue, since that was the reason they gave that why in, what was it, what was the first year of it, 2013 or
2014.
2014, yeah, when
It's when Ohio State jumped into the college football playoff as the 4 seed and ended up winning it all.
Yeah, crazy. Tom Herman's Ohio State offense there got
right.
the job done. But yeah, I mean, I still think, they can't pass on an undefeated TCU team, but they could on a one loss, and that would be pretty bad. But
So if Texas ends up in the Alamo Bowl, the Longhorns would most likely face Utah, Washington, or Oregon State. So you'll be watching the Pac-12 championship game between USC and Utah to see how that all plays out.
Cam Rising.
Yeah, USC could end up in the college football playoff. They could end up in the Rose Bowl. If USC ends up in the college football playoff, Washington most likely would be the Rose Bowl team, and that would leave Utah or Oregon State as Texas's opponent in the Alamo Bowl. So we'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, most likely the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah.
All right, we mentioned Bijan Robinson, one of 3 finalists for the Doak Walker Award, and Taylor, we've been talking him up in the Doak Walker Award circles and possibly the Heisman Trophy circles. After last weekend's games, Bijan Robinson might end up getting some votes to go to New York. We'll see. I think Caleb Williams at USC is probably the odds-on favorite now. And we'll see how he does against Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. But Bijan Robinson, if you take his rushing yards and his receiving yards, he is at 1,580, and that leads the nation in terms of rushing and receiving.
Yeah.
So, and his 20 combined touchdowns are number 2 nationally. So I think you can make a strong argument, and especially the way he's finished the season, over 400 yards rushing in the last 2 games, with 6 touchdowns. So
Yeah.
this is a guy who's just talk about putting an exclamation point on the end of the season. Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, and Steve Sarkisian, I think he said it best, honestly, when we talked to him on Monday. He said, it is unfortunate for Bijan that he wasn't on a team with a better record. And Sark said straight up, and I thought it was really a real comment by him, and it kind of was a poor indictment of him as a coach, I would say, this season a little bit, but he was being real and said, if Bijan, if we were 10-2, or playing for a conference title, or even potentially on the outskirts of a college football playoff bid or something along those lines, then there would be no question that Bijan Robinson would get the invite to New York for the Heisman ceremony. And it kind of goes back to what we've talked about a little bit. Unfortunately for guys like Bijan Robinson, who do everything right both on and off the field, he is pretty much exemplifies what the Heisman is supposed to be. A good character guy, one of the best, arguably the best, player in college football. I think the best running back in college football. His stats show it too. And it's like, but the Heisman, unfortunately, has turned into, oftentimes more than not, the best player on the best team, or the best quarterback a lot of times too. And so it's unfortunate for Bijan that Texas couldn't win some of those, those close games, whether it was Texas Tech or Oklahoma State. I know Texas Tech may not be a good example since he did fumble the ball, which ended the game there. But I mean, you got to feel for him a little bit. And I thought Sark, him saying that, it kind of was a little bit of an indictment on him as a coach, but still the fact that he's able to recognize that, and I would hope, Chip, you are a voter. Obviously, you can't express what you're going to vote or anything like that. But I would hope that voters look more at his body of work than the team he was on, because that's not what the Heisman is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be the best player on the best team or the best quarterback in the country or anything like that. There are awards for that. And so, and a team award is a national title. That it should not be a Heisman. So I hope that voters do look at his whole body of work and everything that he is as a person too, because I would say if you're the Heisman Trust, you want Bijan Robinson as a representative, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. And I think the way that Bijan has finished the season has really helped him. Again,
Mm-hmm.
over 400 yards rushing in the last 2 games. You look at, unfortunately for Blake Corum of Michigan, he wasn't able to play against Ohio State, and Devin Edwards, the kid who replaced him, ran for over 200 yards against Ohio State. And then you have Chase Brown of Illinois, who's had a really good season, but he has 80 more carries than Bijan Robinson. So yes, he's got over 1,600 yards rushing. Bijan's, just over 1,500 yards. Well, 1,580.
Yeah.
Um, but Chase Brown with 80 more carries. And if people look closely at the fact that Bijan Robinson has 314 receiving yards with a 16 and a half yard per catch average, which
Yeah.
is phenomenal for a running back. I think you line him up and you say, okay, Bijan Robinson's the best running back in college football. And that should be enough to get him into the Heisman, finalist voting. But it's been a weird year. A lot of Heisman finalists, or at least guys getting talked about a lot going into the final month of the season, like Hendon Hooker at Tennessee, Drake May at North Carolina, have struggled down the stretch, and um, you know, Heisman voters like to feel like they're putting a bow on something, and
Yeah.
Bijan Robinson has finished really strong. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and for the Doak Walker Award, it would, in my opinion, it would be a shame and a sham, honestly, if he doesn't at least win that award. I was tagged in this tweet from it's a CFB Film Room today, and this should, kind of lined up. It's a breakdown of yards per attempt, yards per attempt after contact, yards per attempt between the tackles, yards per attempt when contacted behind the line of scrimmage, broken tackles per 20 carries. And Bijan Robinson crushes all of those categories. He leads literally every single category over Brown and Corum. So those are important things to acknowledge too when you are looking at the Doak Walker Award. It again, I feel like if he doesn't win that, then whoever makes that call should lose the opportunity to make that call in the future. Like, let's just be real about it.
Well, we mentioned that Steve Sarkisian met with the media on Monday and had a lot of interesting things to say, recapping the season. He was asked, obviously the headline coming out was he was asked about Xavier Worthy, who led the Big 12 in touchdown receptions for a second straight year as a sophomore. He's got 21 touchdown catches in 2 years. He had 12 last year as a freshman All-American, 9 this year. His numbers are down slightly. He had 53 catches this year. He had 62 last year. He had 981 yards receiving last year and just over 600 this year. Sarkisian was asked if Xavier Worthy is happy, and Steve Sarkisian, talked about how, look, he said, well, one thing I know about Xavier is the guy's highly competitive. And from the moment he arrived on our campus, he came to work, and he came to work to earn an opportunity to play, came to work to become a starter. He came to work to be the best receiver he could be, whether that was in our conference or in the country. And so, Taylor, to me, this sounded like a coach who's trying to convince Xavier Worthy that Texas is still the best place for him. There's been a lot of speculation that maybe, players at USC are trying to, encourage him to go play with Caleb Williams
Players,
next year.
players, right?
Players,
not coaches. Yeah.
kind of like Jordan Addison from Pitt, the Biletnikoff Award winner, headed out to USC this year and is on a team that might end up in the college football playoff. But Steve Sarkisian sounded like a coach who's trying to convince Xavier Worthy that Texas is still the best place for him. He said, we're going to work on the passing game. He said that was one of the top priorities. It was the top priority, actually, for Steve Sarkisian heading into the bowl game and into next season. Obviously, the passing game has floundered here down the stretch for Texas. And Xavier Worthy had 9 touchdown catches. I don't think he had a single touchdown catch in the last 3 games.
Yeah, I
2
don't.
games. But it's interesting because Xavier Worthy's you talk to players on the team, he's kind of quiet to himself. He doesn't go out a lot. He plays a lot of Fortnite, but he's always one of the first ones to practice. He works his butt off, takes a lot of pride in his route running and getting open. And there's been visible frustration. Obviously, we've talked about it here on the Flagship podcast that when he doesn't get the ball, on target, on stride, that there are times where he's, not looked like
Like you
he's willing to make the extra effort to go track the errant pass. So this is a tricky one because obviously Xavier Worthy is a huge weapon. He's a guy that defenses have to account for. I'm sure he's frustrated that defenses were doubling him pretty much all year because Texas didn't have another outside receiver to draw attention away from him. That was supposed to be Isaiah Nayer, who's recovering from his torn ACL, but won't be back until next year. So Steve Sarkisian is having to re-recruit Xavier Worthy, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, it does. And one thing, from everything that we have heard, Xavier Worthy does have a really good relationship with wide receivers coach Brennan Marion. The two of them are really close. Relationships do matter. And this is where, the transfer portal has basically made it to where it's very easy for players to leave and very difficult for coaches to keep guys. It's like they have to re-recruit their team pretty much every single year. The thing I'm curious though with Xavier Worthy, Chip, he already technically transferred, correct? How does that work with his, like, I'm like, does he have to sit out a year if he transfers?
I don't know if he got a waiver
Okay.
because as I recall, there was some technicality that he was able to get a waiver from the NCAA, so it wouldn't count technically as his one-time transfer rule.
Okay.
But I'm sure that's something that'll get looked at closely. He
Mhm.
did sign with Michigan initially. He never really got into that program. I think he pretty much arrived on campus and decided he wanted to leave. So this we'll have to check on that waiver to see if that sort of exempts him from the one-time transfer rule.
Yeah. Yeah, because that could be something that could play in Texas' favor a little bit if that is the case. I wasn't sure exactly how that worked with him because I know that he did. I mean, he made it to campus at Michigan, so it's kind of, yeah, it's a weird situation. But I think that Sark intentionally talked a lot about the focus being on improving the passing game on Monday. I think that was an intentional move, probably by him, because he did say he was going to be meeting with players this week, doing kind of the postseason interview process that he has done. There are already some players that are announcing their intention to enter the transfer portal. I think that probably was kind of what happened last year, where those postseason interviews happen, and Sark basically tells them, "We don't see a spot for you," a little bit. I mean, that's just the way that it goes. But Troy O'Meary did say today on Twitter that he intends to enter the transfer portal. There's a few guys that are tweeting this out right now. I mean, our phones, if you can hear them in the background, are blowing up because our staff text literally is blowing up right now talking about the transfer portal. But it's going to be really interesting and fascinating to see if Texas is able to keep Xavier Worthy around. And I think that relationships do matter. I think, Xavier Worthy has made some NIL money. And we'll see how far that does go. But when Sark was talking about improving the passing game, I kind of took that as him being not like a cry for help or anything like that, but like kind of an intentional move so Xavier Worthy can read those headlines that, that is a number one focus for Sark going into the offseason to make that better. He did talk about, I'm not really sure how much I buy into this, but there will be a competition for the quarterback position moving forward. But he mainly said it like we're always going to have a competitive program. And if players don't have a problem with that, then Texas is not the place for them. But I do think the passing game is going to improve, honestly, Chip. I mean, and I know that Xavier Worthy obviously had some frustrations, I think, with Quinn Ewers and just not getting the ball as much. And I
He was
understand
certainly
that.
targeted a lot. He just
Yeah.
didn't he
Didn't
didn't get the ball.
connect
Uh,
very well, yeah. But that's something that happens when you have a freshman quarterback. I mean, we talked about it all offseason. There was going to be growing pains at quarterback. I mean, it was just how it was going to be, whether it was Quinn Ewers or Hudson Card. That was before, but when Quinn Ewers was named the starter, we had said, like, he's a freshman. He hasn't played football in 2 years, essentially. I mean, this is not I know he was a very highly touted recruit. That was like that doesn't happen by accident. It's because his ceiling is really high, and I think that he had to learn on the fly a little bit. But I think those growing pains will lead to progress in this offseason. So I don't doubt that the passing game is going to be far better, and also because I think the offensive line is going to be another year improved as well, and so they're going to kind of grow together a little bit, but that will help Xavier Worthy too. And I think that, you would hope for his sake that he sees it. Because if he doesn't, then, somebody else is going to be the deep ball threat next year. And they're probably going to have a pretty good highlight reel when Quinn Ewers with another year in this offense.
yeah, I mean, these, talented players like Xavier Worthy and others. I mean, Jordan Addison, they want to get the best possible film together so that they can get drafted as high as possible. I mean, Steve Sarkisian, when he recruited Xavier Worthy, compared him to Devontae Smith, and Devontae Smith was a top half of the first round draft pick who's killing it with the Philadelphia Eagles. Um, Very similar in stature, wiry but lightning fast. And I think Xavier Worthy looks at his time at in college as his farm system for the NFL, which I don't blame him. I mean, I'll never forget J.K. Dobbins telling Charlie Strong, when Charlie Strong said, when you go up to visit Ohio State in January, you'll be coming to Texas. And J.K. told him, no, I need to get ready to play in Green Bay and Chicago and Buffalo,
Mhm.
and I'm going to get ready for the NFL. And sure enough, J.K. Dobbins now with the Baltimore Ravens. So, the truly talented special players know where they're going and want to have the best possible. It's not so much the allegiance to the school as it is the preparation for the NFL, which it's not what fans want to hear, but that's that's
It's not.
where
Yeah.
that's where it is. It is
Yeah.
what it is, and we'll see if Sarkisian can convince Xavier Worthy that same Quinn Ewers, who struggled, completed only 50% of his passes the last 4 games of the season, is a guy who can light it up for him next year.
Yeah, and I would be shocked, honestly. I'll say that. I will be shocked, and I will, if I am wrong, I will eat my words. I have no problem doing that. I would be shocked if it's not substantially improved. Like,
Yeah,
we've seen flashes from Quinn Ewers. Like, yes, the last few games have been not the he's not going to put them on his highlight reel when he is going wanting to get to the NFL. That's probably a given, but he has the ability to connect on the deep ball. Obviously, Xavier Worthy is a deep ball threat type of receiver. The more comfortable another year in the offense, the more comfortable he gets with his receivers, gets those reps in with them, the better. And I will be absolutely shocked if somehow we're talking this time next year about how Quinn Ewers is a bust. Because I
yeah,
think that's probably what we would be saying, essentially, sadly, is, okay, he's had 2 full years in this offense. He's not getting better. It was poor rankings or ratings, I would say, by the recruiting analyst. But I don't believe that's going to be the case. I think he has a lot of physical tools that coaches would absolutely eat up, like to having a quarterback that does have those physical tools. Because you can coach mistakes. You can't coach, talent. And I think he has a very natural raw talent, but he is a very high ceiling. He's very talented. And if he's a coachable guy, and he's got to mature in watching film. I mean, those are things that you don't really get just immediately. I mean, we had Michael Griffin on the Flagship interview podcast on Monday. If you did not listen to that, definitely tune in to that after you're done listening Today's Show because Michael Griffin, he always keeps it real, but he talked about how, even at Ohio State when Quinn Ewers was there, it's not like he has had a guy to mold the film study after. CJ Stroud, obviously a very talented quarterback. However, he was young and he was learning how to prepare as a starting quarterback too. And so, when Casey Thompson, one thing, when, going back to last season, he talked about how he prepares like a pro. Everyone talked that, he's always in the film room. He's always doing that. But he said he learned that from Sam Ellinger. He watched Sam Ellinger do it year after year. Quinn Ewers has not had the kind of role model, I guess you would say, of a veteran quarterback on how to prepare like a pro. So that's going to come with time. Sam Ellinger, obviously, that came with time with him too. And so I just think that we're going to be having a far different conversation about Quinn Ewers next year. And there's just things he's got to work on in the offseason. But I think he will. I think he loves football. I don't think it's a matter of a guy that just is really good and's been forced to play football his whole life. I don't think that's the case. I think he loves football. And I think he loves being at the University of Texas, and that can pay huge dividends, honestly. If the happiness is there, happiness with the university and the love of the game, I mean, those are traits that you want in your starting quarterback. And I just think, unfortunately, fans probably had a higher expectation. I think we all maybe had a little bit higher expectation for Quinn Ewers, but I don't think it's time to throw in the towel on him either at all.
Well, it's going to be interesting because obviously Hudson Card is a guy who we've been talking about it all year on the Flagship podcast, especially since the Oklahoma State game when he didn't get a chance to get into that game when Ewers was 19 of 49 passing. And, the sources I've talked to have indicated that Card will transfer. That leaves Quinn Ewers as the old man in the room for Malik Murphy, for Arch Manning, and puts Texas in a little bit of a tough spot. I mean, I think of Oklahoma State this year. They had Spencer Sanders. They had Shane Illingworth. Illingworth transferred, went to Nevada. Oklahoma State didn't have a clear backup, and it cost them dearly when Spencer Sanders got hurt in the second half of the season. Oklahoma State lost games they never would have lost normally if they had either Spencer Sanders available or an experienced backup quarterback. So if Card is gone, then who's pushing Ewers other than Arch Manning, who we expect to redshirt? That's been sort of the underlying theme involving his recruitment, and so Quinn Ewers is going to have to step up because Texas and Malik Murphy. I mean, if Sark can hang on to Malik Murphy, then that's a guy who needs to take another step too, and we'll see if that quarterback room can prosper, because Hudson Card took a big step this year. He got his chance to start last year, struggled a little bit, but was greatly improved. His game this year against West Virginia was outstanding. 21 of 27 passing, 4 touchdown passes in a really his best game as a Longhorn. So this is an interesting time, and the portal is heating up. We called it portal season with Steve Sarkisian on Monday, and you're seeing a lot of guys indicating on social media they're going to get in the transfer portal. DJ Harris, Prince Dorba, JD Coffey at safety, Andre Carrick, the offensive lineman who was sort of the tight end 6th offensive lineman for Texas this year. He's indicated he's going to get in the transfer portal. So a lot of things, the roster is changing as we speak, Taylor.
Yeah, and Chip, not to cut you off, this is kind of breaking news right now. Pete Thamel just reported that Hudson Card plans to enter the transfer portal. And he cited a source saying that his priorities are winning and finding a place that fits his skill set to continue to develop. No surprise here. I mean, I think the writing was on the wall, especially in that Oklahoma State game, as you mentioned. So that is being reported. Sorry, I was not trying to like not listen or anything, but I have to send
Yeah,
it to
well,
our staff. But yeah,
he's a Longhorn through and through. His degree is important to him. He's graduating in December, and that gives him his degree from Texas, and he will have at least 2 seasons of eligibility
right.
moving forward. So that's going to be a, a big time quarterback land for someone. And again, leaves the Longhorns thin at the quarterback position in terms of experience. Does Steve Sarkisian go try to bring in a 1-year guy? We'll see, because
Yeah,
Steve Sarkisian wasn't ready to commit to what positions he would be looking for in the portal, because he said, I don't know what our roster is going to look like here when the portaling is declared by the Longhorns after they meet with Sarkisian. This is how it played out last year. Players go in and meet with him. Sarkisian tries to be honest with them and says, okay, here's where you are on the depth chart, and here are the guys ahead of you. And if they're younger guys ahead of you, it's pretty much him saying, if you really think you deserve playing time, then you might need to go look somewhere else. So that is happening
yeah,
literally as we speak.
literally. Yeah, I just
Literally.
said this stat in our staff. We have a group text with our whole staff, and I was like, "Yeah, Chip and I deciding to record a little earlier than normal today because we normally record like later Tuesday afternoon. We started recording around 1 o'clock on Tuesday. I was like, not the best idea by us today because our phones are blowing up. Obviously, there's a number of guys that have announced their intentions. So just to recap, at least for now, Pete Thamel reporting Hudson Card plans to enter the transfer portal. It looks like Jameer Johnson is planning on entering the portal. Yeah, entering the transfer portal too. Sorry, I'm just trying to read all of these texts that we've gotten in the last few minutes.
And
And
that
Andre
affects,
Carrick is planning to enter the transfer portal. JD Coffee is planning to enter the transfer portal. Um, Trello. Troy O'Meary. I saw T.O. and it's transfer portal season. Obviously, it's burning my brain up too. But Troy O'Meary also
yeah,
has
Troy
said,
O'Meary, Prince Dorba. And so it's DJ Harris, the edge rusher, also announcing his intention to get into the transfer portal. Taylor, when Steve Sarkisian was talking yesterday, he did say that he wishes he would have found a way to run the ball better in the second halves of the Texas Tech and Oklahoma State games. And it's painful to hear him say that about the Oklahoma State game, simply because Bijan Robinson had 2 fourth quarter drives that he, had carries averaging 6.5 yards and 11 yards per carry. And those 2 drives ended with pass attempts on second and third down. One ending in a punt, the other in a 46-yard missed field goal. If he would have just kept handing the ball to Bijan and Roshan on those drives, I feel certain the outcome would have been similar to what we saw in the Baylor game.
yeah,
So that's tough. And I give Steve Sarkisian credit for addressing it, saying it. That's a tough one, because you win that Oklahoma State game, you're in the Big 12 title game.
yeah, we're
Um,
previewing that game, not previewing the transfer portal
right,
right
right,
now.
right. We'd be talking about the rematch with
Mm,
TCU instead of Hudson Card getting ready to transfer.
yeah,
Um,
and we'd probably be preparing for a trip to New Orleans too, because it's hard to beat the same team twice in a season. I think if Texas got a rematch with TCU, they would have won that game.
yeah, yeah. Um, Steve Sarkisian also, talking about the pleasant surprises this season, the kicking game. He talked about Bert Auburn, Will Stone on kickoffs, Daniel Trejo on the punting chores, and also the offensive line as pleasant surprises. I don't think there's any doubt that the future is so bright for Kelvin Banks, and even for Cole Hudson, who has a sprained ankle but should be back for the bowl game. And Hayden Connor and Jake Majors. I mean, Jake Majors has been identified as a future leader, a leader who will take the mantle possibly from Roschon Johnson and Bijan Robinson. Um, and that's good stuff because you've got a talented group of younger offensive linemen that include DJ Campbell, Cam Williams, Malik Agbo, and
N-
Nato Umezola.
Yeah.
Umazulu.
I still have not said his last name correctly. And I'm kind of at the point now, Chip, where I'm like, until I hear him saying it, I'm just going to call him NATO.
Yeah,
Like that.
NATO.
That's who he is. Yeah. I need to
So,
hear it from his mouth.
and you've got commitments. You've got some talented offensive line commitments coming in the 2023 class. He did say, he understands the reality of some guys not playing in bowl games, i.e. Bijan Robinson,
Yeah.
and, possibly Roschon Johnson, possibly Jordan Whittington. We'll have to see. I mean, Sarkisian said, listen, I'm going to put in a pitch to some of these guys if I think it would benefit them to come back. Some of the seniors who walked on last Friday. So we'll see. Jordan Whittington is the one that I just feel like, man, he could use another season,
Yeah.
a full healthy season, and a quarterback with another year of experience who can find him on the field. And so we'll see. We'll see if Sarkisian can make a pitch to Jordan Whittington to convince him to come back, and maybe you can get Whittington, Worthy, and Isaiah Nair to see the light. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting because when Sark said that, I kind of in my head I was thinking like he's talking about Bijan doesn't need to play in the bowl game, like,
Yeah,
and he understands it. Like, he said that the risk um, doesn't for some guys doesn't outweigh the reward, but there are some guys that could use another game film for the NFL to see, and talking about some of the seniors as you had mentioned, I agree with you about Jordan Whittington. I think another season of film would be good. It's kind of hard because he's had so many injuries that I could kind of see why he would be kind of chomping at the bit a little bit to get into the NFL because he has had one healthy season, but his numbers don't support him foregoing remaining eligibility, in my opinion. I think that it would be probably in his best interest to have two healthy seasons because the NFL is gonna look at that as well. Like he's an injury risk and he's only had one healthy season. I mean, it's a tough decision. I think that he has to make. I kind of see both sides, but I think it would be in his best interest to return for another year, get another full healthy season of game film, so that any of the injury questions he had earlier in his career may be wiped away by another healthy season. Because the NFL teams are gonna look at that and probably not draft him. I mean, I would not be surprised if Jordan Whittington enters the NFL draft if he doesn't get drafted. He, undrafted free agent type of thing. Which, guys can make a career out of that. But I do think that I would be, I mean, I'm curious for your take, Chip. Do you think he gets drafted if he goes?
no,
Yeah, me
no.
neither.
I mean, 45 catches, 608 yards, 1 touchdown. Um, he's a good downfield blocker. His film shows he's tough, and he has film from the 2021 season when he made all those third down catches. During the first part of the season before he injured his collarbone against OU, but there's not enough there,
Mhm.
and so we'll see. We'll see what the rationale is. Hopefully, we'll get to talk to Jordan, heading into the bowl game. But yeah, so lots going on,
Yes.
Taylor, and we have to mention the men's basketball team is number 2 in the nation and will be taking on number 7 Creighton on Thursday, a top 10 showdown. This Creighton team is ridiculous. They have 4 players shooting better than 40% from 3-point range. They have 5 players averaging double figures in scoring, including their 7'1" center. So this will be a great test of the Longhorns, um, new top 5 AP status, and Texas volleyball opens the NCAA tournament as the #1 overall seed on Thursday night as well. You got Texas basketball at 6, women's volleyball at 8. So Texas fans, get on your horse from the Moody Center to Gregory Gym for that. Taylor, you ready for some Love It or Leave It?
I am. Before we get to Love It or Leave It, we're going to take a really quick break, but stay tuned. We have more football talk coming up here. We'll be right back. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will roll on as usual to Love It or Leave It. Chip, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. My first one for you is Love It or Leave It. You agree with Sark that the most pleasant surprises of the regular season for Texas were the kicking game and the offensive line.
No, I'm going to leave this and say the defense. I mean, what a turnaround for this Texas defense, uh, going from giving up 31 points per game to right around 20. And the emergence of guys like Jalen Ford, Jade Barron, the play of that defensive line, that to me was easily the most pleasant surprise of the 2022 season, and after being one of the biggest disappointments of the 2021 season. So I'm going to leave that. Taylor, how about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it, and I'm gonna agree with you about the defense. I would say that the emergence of the defensive line probably was one of the most pleasant surprises. Because I mean, this was a defense line. We were joking, I think it was in spring camp or in spring football. There was it was either that or fall camp. I can't remember, but there was a media availability where we were waiting around for interviews to start, and there was a media member that goes, all right, I'm going to quiz you guys on this. Who led the team in sacks last season? And I was the only one. I was like, wasn't it? Like, it took us all kind of a while. And then I was like, wasn't it Ben Davis? And then he was like, yep. It's like Ben Davis didn't even play in every game and he had 2.5 sacks. So I think that the defensive line was probably the biggest improvement because I mean, Michael Griffin talked about this too. When you get the guys up front are doing their jobs, it allows guys like Jalen Ford and DeMarvion Overshone and even the corners and safeties to make plays and play more freely and play more instinctively because they're not, having to worry about the offense even reaching really the second line of the defense at that point, and they can go and add the pressure to it. So he credited the defensive line for the emergence of Jalen Ford. And when he said that, I was like, he's spot on. That's exactly the case. I remember when Puna Ford, was in his final season at Texas in 2017. Malik Jefferson won the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year award. And I asked Malik, I was like, I know you won this award, but how crucial was Puna Ford? And he was like, I should share the award with Puna Ford. Honestly, he's like, because he's the reason why I won that. And, when you get that pressure up front, it makes the whole defense so much better. It makes the guys be able to play instinctively. And so, yeah, I would leave this. I would say the overall defense, predominantly though, the defensive line. Bo Davis, he deserves every dollar of that $1 million contract that he got this offseason.
All right, number 2.
Second one is Love It or Leave It. Sorry if you hear my dog barking in the background. On a scale of 1 to 10, your level of concern about the Texas passing game right now is at a 9.
Wow. Okay, I'll leave this and say 8.5. Um, you know, again, it's tough. I mean, the Quinn Ewers last 5 games, 78 of 156 passing, exactly 50% completion rate, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 8 sacks. And again, it'll get better. It should get better, but it is a concern. It's a big concern right now because you may or may not have, you probably won't have Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson for the bowl game. Jonathan Brooks, come on down. Keelan Robinson, come on down. But your running game has been such a massive part of your offense, and it should be with guys like Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson. But the passing game, if you have to rely on it to win, that's a huge concern. So I'll leave it, because 9 is like really extreme, but 8.5. How about you, Taylor?
I'm gonna leave it too, but I would say I have faith that Steve Sarkisian and Quinn Ewers can get this to improve so much more. If we're talking about like level of concern going into 2023, I would for sure leave it. I wouldn't. I think I would say 8.5. Personally, I would disagree with you on that. I would say it would be less than that because I think you're going to see a substantial jump from year one to year two of Quinn Ewers in this offense, getting more comfortable, and also the fact that the offensive line is going to be 1 year more mature as well. I mean, I think that's going to people I get why there is like a kind of like raise the red flag alarms, sound the alarms right now about the Texas passing game. I just think about how much different Sam Ellinger was from year one to year two. You can go down the list more times than not. These players that have a really high ceiling, they're going to make a substantial leap from their first year playing in college football to their second year. So I'm going to leave it. I would say mine would be probably more around like a 6. And again, if I'm way off and we're talking about this again next year, I'll eat my words and I will come back and listen to this podcast and say I was wrong. I was wrong. I don't see it being as dire of a situation. I think that it seems at this point.
Yeah. All right. Number 3.
Final one, Chip. You picked Kansas State to win the Big 12 before the season. So you have the Wildcats knocking off TCU on Saturday. Love it or leave it.
You know what? I do. I do. I think Kansas State with Will Howard at quarterback, they came through. Kansas tried to rally, but ended up Kansas State 47, KU 27. I think Kansas State puts it together and figures out a way to gum it up for TCU. K-State will be your Big 12 champion. So I'm loving this. Taylor, how about you?
Gosh, I kind of want to leave it just because I don't like agreeing with you on all of them, but it's hard for a team to beat the same team twice in the season. It just like the history shows it is not an easy thing to accomplish. I would love to see TCU win the Big 12 and go to the college football playoff, especially after they got screwed out of it. I think their first year of the college football playoff, unfortunately, it's just such a good story. I would say what happened with TCU this year under a first year head coach, just everything, the fact that they're in this position. But all that to say, it's probably an even better story of what's going on at K-State this year. And so I'm gonna have to love this and say that K-State does beat TCU to win the Big 12.
All right, there it is, folks. We got to get back to work. We got kids jumping in the
Yeah.
portal.
Yes.
Thanks
We're
so
losing
much.
our mind here.
Yeah, stay tuned. If you ever needed a reason to get over to horns247.com as we sign off, there it is. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Flagship Podcast. For Taylor Estes, I am Chip Brown. We'll see you over at horns247.com. Until then, stay safe and keep the faith.